All right, so can we please put away our devices, take off our earbuds, put away our phones, please, and thank you. Today we're going to review domain and range. So if you look at your bell work packet, the bell work packet in the second box has this graph. So when you're looking at domain, you're looking at the arrows going left and right. So left and right. So domain is left and right. Okay, so because I have an arrow that goes left and right, my domain is all real numbers. So in your homework that I passed out yesterday, one of the things you had to do was identify domain and range of many different graphs. I put at the top where it says M8 in the right corner or left right hand corner, I wrote it in marker. You see where it says HW1? Do you see, hold it up, do you see where I wrote it in marker? Yeah, it says M8 for module 8 and then homework 1. So HW means homework. That's how I abbreviate homework. Okay, so that's homework 1, and we'll talk about homework at the end of class because I'm doing homework a little differently. Okay, so range, you're going to look down and up. So we don't have an arrow going down. We only have 2 arrows pointing up. So my domain is not all real numbers. So the lowest this graph goes is right here. So if I zoom in, this is 0. This would be -1. This is -2, -3, and -4. 1 second. So your y values are greater than or equal to -4. So y is greater than and equal to -4. So this is yesterday's handout, not today's handout. So today's handout, put to the side, take out your binder. Are you asking where this question is?
Oh, I was just asking what's today?
August 15th. Yeah. That was at the top. I think you weren't ready because you were doing something different. Okay, so y is greater than or equal to -4, which in interval notation would be a bracket -4 to infinity. So we have a lot of handouts in this class. That's why I'm trying to get everyone to try to get a binder. I will eventually flip that to an extra credit grade, but not yet. And if I do, it's usually at the end of the semester. So, okay. Any questions about how we found our domain and range? So today we're going to learn about continuous, discrete, or neither. So now pull out your note packet. You can put away your bell work packet. Go to your notes. I'm sorry? It will be eventually. Okay, so in your note packet, right now our test is on September 1st, which is a Friday. That'll be, and it's the Friday before Labor Day. It might move up though to that Thursday. So yesterday we started 8.1 and we talked about domain and range. Is it a function? Is it one-to-one? Or is it neither? That was yesterday. Today, we're looking at, is it discrete? Is it continuous? Or is it neither? All right, so I will put this back up in a second. So now let's go ahead and go to your note packet. Discrete, continuous, and neither. So in that description, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. It gives you the definition of continuous. A continuous function, simply put, a continuous function is an unbroken. It's a line that is unbroken. That's just the main simple definition. So go ahead and underline that. Or if you have a highlighter, you can highlight that. I do have highlighters underneath next to the red basket too that you can borrow. All right, if a function is not continuous, it is discontinuous. So the opposite of continuous is discontinuous. And then a discrete function is just points that are not connected. So in example 4, we're going to look at a couple of things. The first thing we're going to figure out is it discrete, continuous, or neither? And then we're going to state the domain and range. So when we look at example 4, I'm going to zoom in really closely to that graph that's on your paper. Do you notice how on this graph, it's a continuous line? So there are no breaks or open circles. So write that in your notes right next to it. So there's no breaks and no open points. And we'll see on the next one what an open point looks like. If you don't have any breaks or open points, it is continuous. I'm going to ask that you all please put away your phone, like it should not be on your desk. As discussed on the first day of school, please put them away, and then at the end of the lesson, you can take them back out. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, so this is a continuous curve. This is continuous because we don't have any breaks or discontinuities. So I want you to, this is what we call an odd function. So I want you to notice how we have arrows going left and right. Arrows go left, right. And there's also an arrows that go up and down. So because of that, whenever you see that, that's how we know our domain and range is going to be all real numbers. So when you see that, both the domain and range are all real numbers. So my domain is all real numbers and my range is all real numbers. So we're going to look at just a couple more graphs in our notes, and then we're going to look at the handout that I passed out today, and that's it. All right, I'm going to zoom in really closely to this graph so you can see that. Do you notice how we have an open circle there? That's a discontinuity. So this graph is not continuous. This is actually neither. You can say neither, or you can say it's discontinuous. And I write too big to fit it in that little bitty box. So this function is neither, or you can say it's discontinuous, and it's because of this hole right here. If that hole was not there, it would be continuous. But that open circle means that we have a discontinuity. There's a break in the graph. So where is this point located? That open circle. As an ordered pair, that point is at x equals 2. So when we look at our graph, right here, x is 2. And what's my y value? Yes. Yes, so this discontinuity is at 2, 1. So at 2, 1, we have an issue. We have a discontinuity at that point. So that's going to affect our domain and range. So for my domain, we could say it's all real numbers but x cannot equal 2. So we have to put that little statement there. Because of this break right here, x cannot equal 2. X can equal anything except for 2. And for my range, that's all real numbers. But y cannot equal 1. And that is how you're going to write your domain and range.
So you put
Neither or discontinuous because of that open circle. If you take away that open circle, it would be continuous. And the domain and range would be all real numbers. And then the last thing we talked about if we look at our definitions, what I have highlighted in blue, and I'm going to go back to that slide. It says a discrete function is when you have points that are not connected. That's what a discrete function is. So this one, example C, do you see how I have points that are not connected? That is called a discrete function. It is discrete. And for your domain, you simply list all of the x values of your points. So let's talk about how we did that. So if I'm just looking at every point, and I'm going to see what are the x values of those points. So your domain, because my first one, x is -3, and then it's -2. Do you see these numbers listed off to the side here? These are the x values of every point on the graph. So if I look at the x values, I have a point at -3, and then there's a point at -2. There's a point at -1, a point at +1, a point at +3, and a point at +4. That's your domain. And then your range, we're looking at our y values. So we're starting here, y equals -3. You always start with the lowest y value and you go up. So your range, we have -3, and then the next y value would be -2. And then we hop back up, we got +1, +2, +3, and +4. So can everyone look at homework 1 real quick? Look at question number 4. There is a discrete function, and you're just listing the x values. And for your range, you're listing the y values. Yes, I was just going over one homework question. All right, so our last thing now that we have done that, is look at that second handout that I gave you. So we got to practice. That's the only way we're going to make sure we do well on our very first test. So you should have 2 handouts that you picked up. Now I want you to go ahead and look at these first 2 graphs and tell me the domain and range and if it's 1 to 1. And then we'll be finished. We got 5 more graphs. So I want you to take a few minutes looking at question 1 and 2, state the domain and range of the handout that you picked up. So looking at those 2 graphs, everyone should just try. Take a couple of minutes. say the domain and range. Take a guess. Don't leave it blank. Just take a guess. This is a chance for you to practice before the test. What would you tell me the domain and range would be? And do you think it's a function or one-to-one? So just take a guess and see, and then we'll go over it together. So this is simply a practice, kind of like practicing the questions that you may see on the test. And you can talk to the person next to you. Ask them what they think. See if you all agree. So take a couple of minutes and then we'll go through it together. Okay, so let's look at question number 1 together. So we have arrows. I'm gonna make these arrows a little bit bigger because those arrows are kind of small. So we have an arrow going to the left and an arrow pointing to the right. Whenever you see an arrow pointing to the left and an arrow pointing to the right, your domain is all real numbers. Now, do you see an arrow that's pointing down? So both of these arrows point up. So this does not have a range of all real numbers. So we're going to look at how low this goes on the y-axis. This is as low as it goes. What does y equal right here? -2. So your range is y is greater than or equal to -2. So now let's see, is it a function? So do we think this is a function? So in order for it to be a function, it needs to pass a vertical line test. So if I draw a vertical line, how many times does that red line go through the graph? One time. If it goes through more than once, it fails the test. But this only crossed once. So that means that this is a function. Yes, it passed the vertical line test. So if you draw a vertical line, if it crosses the graph in only one spot, it is a function. If it crosses it more than once, it's not a function.
But how would it cross more than one time?
So we actually have that in the number 2, in the second one. But if I draw a horizontal line, do you see if I draw this horizontal line, how many times does that cross through the graph?
Once.
I see twice. It crosses it here and here.
Oh, that's one.
That's twice. So this would not be 1-to-1. So for 1-to-1, we would say no. And it's a no because it failed the horizontal line test. Now question 2 doesn't have any arrows, so it doesn't have a function. It doesn't have a domain or range of all real numbers. So for my x, this graph goes from -4 to +6. So my domain would be -4 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 6. Because this circle goes to -4 on the x-axis to +6 on the x-axis. And I'll zoom back out in a second. I just want you all to see this circle. That's how I'm determining the domain. I'm looking at the x-axis because this is the x-axis. It comes -4 to +6. So that would be my domain. So now let's talk about range though. On the y-axis, it goes from here to here. So for the range, the lowest it goes is -2. What's the highest it goes? +4, good. So your range would be -2, y +4. That's how you write your range. This graph is not a function and it's also not one-to-one. It fails the horizontal line test and the vertical line test. So if I draw a vertical line, and I'll zoom back out, do you see how this blue line, let me draw a different color, how this red line goes through the graph in 2 places? Yeah. So that means it's not a function. It fails the function test. It also fails, and if it's not a function, it's not one-to-one. So if it fails the vertical line test, you don't even need to do a horizontal line test because the answer is no. So you would say no. This graph is not a function and it's also not one-to-one. All right, so let's flip our page over and look at a couple more. All right, do you think this graph is a, let's do our domain and range. So for domain, so how far to the left does this graph go? So it doesn't have any arrows. So we go from here to here on the x-axis. Let me zoom in. So how far is that first line? What is x equal right here? I didn't mean it. I kind of -6. And then what about right here? +5. Good. So our domain would be from -6 to +5. And our range, all right, so let's see how low it goes. It goes here. This is my lowest point. This is my highest point. So the lowest it goes would be a -5. We got to switch that from an x to a y because we're talking about range now. And the highest it goes is 7. That would be your range. Now we don't have any places where this graph is where you have the same x values occurring. So this is a function. So function, yes. But one-to-one, it definitely would fail a horizontal line test. It fails a horizontal line test. So it's not one-to-one. All right, so the last question I want to do, we may pick up on this tomorrow, is this function here, which, what do you call this function? It's not continuous, it would be what? Discrete. This is discrete. So let's write our domain and range. So what I'm going to do is label, I want you to write all of these points as ordered pairs. So this first point would be at -7, +7. And then this point here, this is at -1, +6. Yes.
Is one for the last one, yes?
Yes, I'm sorry, I did not. No, that's a no. I meant to write that. It's no because it fails the horizontal line test. So if you look at the screen again, Daniel, notice that when you draw a horizontal line, that green line is actually going through the graph way more than once. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So it fails the horizontal line test. All right, so now let's go back here. I'm just labeling these ordered pairs. We have 5 of them. And then this one here would be -1, -5. This point would be at 1, 0. And this one here is at 4, 7. All right, make sure that's correct. Do you agree with my points? So for your domain, you're just going to list those x values. So I'm just listing these numbers. So -7, -1. You don't have to list the same number twice. So my domain would be -7, -1, 1, and 4. And you make those really fancy brackets when it's a discrete function. And then for your range, starting with your lowest y value, so my lowest y value would be this point here, and that's -5. What would be the next y value? Zero. And then after 0, 6. Wait, that point is wrong. This point is wrong right here. Let's go back and fix that. That's not -7, 7. What should that be? -7 what? 5. Make that a 5.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, let's fix that. Okay. All right, so we have, back to our y values. So we have -5, and then we have 0. And then here we have +5, +6, and +7. Now this function, this discrete function, or discrete relation, it's not a function. This discrete relation is not a function because of these 2 points here. Do you notice how these 2 points have the same x value? So because of this, because of that point, both having a -1, because if we go back to yesterday's lesson, you cannot have a repeat in the domain. Because of that, this is not a function, and it's also not one-to-one. So function, we will say no. And one-to-one, we'll also say no. All right, so now let's talk about our new homework policy. So I am no longer going to collect your homework. I'm going to stamp that purple sheet. So here's the thing, you cannot lose that sheet because I'm only going to collect the purple sheet on test dates and put it into Skyward. So what I'm going to do is I am going to check, I'm checking your homework off for completion and accuracy. And then after I post the answer key, you cannot get full credit for the homework. So I am going to check homework 1. I'm going to check it on Thursday. On this Thursday, you need to have homework 1 finished. Okay? So I recommend that you put this purple sheet in your binder. I'll go back in a second. Put the purple sheet in the binder. I did fill in for module 8 because module 8 has 4 homework assignments. I did fill that in. So every homework assignment is worth 50 points. But after I post the answer key, the most you can get is 35 points. So you want to make sure you get your homework checked off before I post the answer key. And the answer key for this first assignment is going to post on Monday. So I'm going to put up the answer key so you can check your homework and make sure you're doing it right. So the answer key I will post on Monday. And what is Monday? The date on Monday? I think it's the 21st. Yeah. So after this date, the highest you can get would be a 35 out of 50. So to get a 50 out of 50, you need to have it and show it to me. I'm going to walk around during bell work time on Thursday and also on Friday, and I'll stamp your purple sheet. All right, any questions about how we're doing homework?